In the coastal region of Africa, an illegal fishing vessel is about to catch a shark. Using a type of weapon, the two sailors, Kaio and Ruki, eliminate the poor animal and remove its fin, dumping the rest of its body in the middle of the sea. After this, the sailors take a photo with the fins they have collected when they receive an emergency call on the radio. The message is followed by a flare, informing all ships near the area to return to port immediately. Kaio thinks it's best to go back, as he fears they'll be arrested by the Coast Guard, but Ruki doesn't intend to give up his hunt. Suddenly, the ship begins to rock, and along with it, a shoal of 5 sharks appears on the scene, swimming synchronously. They advance towards the ship and crash into the hull, causing the 2 sailors to fall into the water. Kaio becomes the first victim, with the marine predators devouring his legs and pulling him to the bottom of the sea. Desperate, Ruki tries to swim back to the ship, but is also captured, with the sharks removing his arms and legs. Nearby, a dinghy piloted by former Marine Trent Slater finds the ship, but there is no sign of the sailors anywhere. Soon afterwards, the shoal of sharks attacks again, but Trent uses a sound wave transmitter, causing the predators to retreat. Far away, at a university, Dr. Misty gives her presentation, raising awareness among the students about illegal shark hunting. She shows a video recording of her swimming with them, proving that they are peaceful creatures if they are not provoked. However, there is one species that she recommends keeping distance from, the bull shark, which is considered even more dangerous than the great white. At the end of the presentation, the doctor is approached by Greg Burns, a representative of Durant Pharmaceuticals. He tells her that his boss wants to hire Misty's services, and as a down payment, he hands her a check for $50,000. Even though she finds the proposal suspicious, the doctor accepts the deal because she needs funds to finance her shark conservation campaign. Meanwhile, Trent returns to the base and confronts his colleague, Elder, because he saw the school of bull sharks loose in the middle of the sea. Elder says that this is impossible, as the cameras show the shoal inside the base, which is protected by electric fences. However, when they look more closely, the two see an opening under the fences, indicating that the sharks have found a way to escape. The next day, Misty goes to the port and meets Greg, along with Daniel, a neurophysiologist, and Leslie, a neurobiologist. They have also been hired as consultants, but the couple reveal that they don't know what the job is. This only increases Misty's suspicions, but Greg calls everyone to the boat, which will take them to Durant Pharmaceuticals' secret base. When they arrive at the site, Misty meets Trent, who has just reinforced the security with graphite hoops to intensify the voltage of the electric fences. The doctor asks why, and he replies that it's to keep the guinea pigs trapped inside the base. He then shows the doctor the side glass, revealing the bull sharks bred in captivity. Soon after, the owner of the operation, Carlos Durant, introduces himself to the consultants, but Dr. Misty doesn't like what she sees and demands explanations. She says that using such an aggressive species as a guinea pig is dangerous, but Carlos assures her that his security system is infallible. He then decides to give a demonstration and takes everyone up to the terrace, where Elder is waiting for them. The young man is about to start the presentation when Carlos suddenly pushes him into the water. The 3 consultants despair and order Elder to swim back, but he becomes desperate, forcing Misty to jump into the water to rescue him. She manages to reach him, but soon they see 5 fins coming towards them. Misty does her best to swim back, and just as the sharks were about to devour them, Trent activates his soundwave device. Thanks to this, the predators move away and the group helps Misty and Elder out of the water. This presentation makes Misty even angrier, but Carlos explains that he has created a way of taming the sharks. Not only that, he has taught them to swim in synchronization, but he asks the doctor to be patient, as everything will be explained soon. Afterwards, Carlos returns to his room, where he picks up a small case containing vials of a red substance. He takes one of them and the liquid seems to cause an unknown reaction in his body. Greg then appears on site and tells his boss about the escape of the sharks, which have managed to create an opening under the fences. In addition, Trent reports that the sharks have attacked sailors at sea, and if this goes public, the whole project will be over. However, Carlos is pleased with this news, as everything indicates that his experiment is going according to plan. It is then revealed that the owner of the company has developed a chemical compound capable of turning sharks into more intelligent beings. Carlos also reveals that when his experiment is finished, the sharks will have to be eliminated, so as not to leave any traces of his research. Little does he know that while he was saying this to Burns, one of the sharks was watching the conversation through the window, being able to understand everything from his lip movements. Hours later, Carlos sends for the consultants to explain everything about his experiment. He tells them that the project has reached a critical juncture and he needs the expertise of all 3 of them to finish it. In Leslie and Daniel's case, Their expertise in neuroscience is the key to finalizing a compound capable of enhancing the intelligence of a living being. Leslie replies that they are only familiar with the development of stimulants, which only reinforce existing brain capacity. However, Carlos claims to have developed a compound strong enough to alter the genetic structure of the brain, using shark cells. Again, he decides to prove his theory with a demonstration and asks Trent to use the compound on one of the sharks, called Bella. Afterwards, he has the team take the animal to the tank inside the base to show the consultants its vital signs. Finally, Carlos demonstrates that as well as being a harmless procedure for the animals, the results prove that sharks are becoming increasingly intelligent. If the whole experiment goes well, very soon they will be able to carry out tests on human beings. The aim is to develop a compound capable of exponentially increasing human reasoning and thus maintaining humanity as the dominant species in the world. With the advance of artificial intelligence, Carlos fears that humans will become obsolete, and if something isn't done, they will soon be replaced. After all the talk, Misty is still not convinced and claims that Carlos just has a god complex, seeing himself as a supposed savior of humanity. In response, he says that when his project is finished, all humans will have the chance to become gods. Faced with Carlos' arrogance, Misty goes to talk to Josh, one of his employees, to ask about the effects of the compound on the sharks. He says that since the beginning, the predators have not only become more intelligent, but have also enhanced their senses, especially their eyesight. What's more, he reveals that his boss has also started taking the compounds, in the hope of feeling the effects of the enhancement. Misty thinks this is crazy and goes to confront Carlos, asking why she was called to this project. He replies that despite the improvements made to the compound, Bella has been acting strangely and this doesn't seem to have anything to do with her improved intelligence. He waits for the doctor to explain the reason for this, and without thinking too much, Misty deduces that Bella is pregnant. Josh doesn't believe it, as they take blood weekly, but Misty suspects that the compound may have interfered with the blood readings. In addition to this problem, another arises when, for no apparent reason, one of the boats starts to move on its own and crashes into the power generator. At the same time, several barrels are knocked over and start pouring fuel into the water. With the electrical system compromised, Trent rushes to check the generator, fearing that the whole thing was caused by one of the sharks. Meanwhile, Josh goes into the tank to confirm that Bella is indeed pregnant and puts up a support to keep her mouth open. He then leaves the shark unconscious and sticks his arm in to take a sample from her throat. However, just as he was about to succeed, the shark's eye begins to move and Josh quickly pulls his arm out, seconds before Bella almost removes it with her teeth. Misty helps him out of the water, and the shark, who is still sedated, is thrown into the tank. At the same moment, the fuel thrown into the water is ignited by the sparks from the generator, causing an explosion which results in a breakdown of the entire electrical system. The impact of the explosion shakes the entire base, causing gaps in the hull and disabling the electricity in the fences. As a result, the sharks begin to swim freely around the base, and thanks to their developed intelligence, they advance against the cameras and destroy them. In another room, Greg hurries to find the rest of the team and ask what's going on. However, the walls of the corridor begin to leak, and when one of the sharks collides with the base, water invades the place and spreads everywhere. Back in the tank, Elder tries to reactivate the electrical system and checks which corridors have been compromised. He discovers a leak in the east corridor and Misty confirms this by looking at the flood through the window, followed by Greg's body, already lifeless and with an unrecognizable face. Despite the frightening sight, Misty notices a strange pattern in the bites and doesn't believe they were made by ordinary bull sharks. She suspects that Greg was actually attacked by Bella's prematurely born pups. Because of the compound in their bodies, they are no ordinary pups and resemble even more dangerous versions of piranhas. With the corridors flooded, the group's only hope is to reach the base's terrace, but Trent warns them that sharks are surrounding the place. Because of her knowledge of sharks, Misty believes that they don't just want to escape, but also take revenge on those responsible for the experiments. This only makes the situation even more desperate and everyone demands that Carlos find a way to save themselves. The owner of the base suggests flying the thruster inside the tank, getting to the terrace and using the phone to call the Coast Guard for help. Misty readily offers to do this, but Trent refuses because it's too dangerous and says he should go because he knows the base better. While the two of them argue, Mike, Trent's right-hand man, quickly gets into the tank and starts the thruster. The rest of the survivors watch him swim out of the side window, but halfway there, Mike is attacked by one of the sharks and falls unconscious. Everyone despairs, believing that he will run out of air, but seconds later, Trent swims to his friend and takes him back to the tank. Once there, Misty gives Mike a heart massage until he finally regains consciousness. He thanks everyone for their help and goes to get the rest of the equipment from the tank, but is surprised by Bella, who jumps out of the water and devours his head. Faced with this scene, Dr. Misty says that all the creatures must be eliminated, because they are not ordinary sharks, but monsters created in a laboratory. Carlos refuses, but the discussion is soon interrupted when the base begins to implode. Because of the pressure built up, the water invades the whole place, pushing everyone and separating them between the corridors. Trent and Misty end up in one of them, and with a lot of effort, they manage to close the door to prevent the place from flooding even more. After that, they go in search of the exit, while Daniel looks for Leslie, who is unconscious in another corridor. Josh and Elder are also alive and make their way to the dormitories, as they are further away from the corridor where the shark pups were seen. Finally, Carlos walks alone through the base and takes another dose of the compound, hoping that the effect will help him escape this situation. Seconds later, he meets up with Trent and Misty and tells them that there is a way out through the filter room. Their only chance is to take this route, ask the Coast Guard for help, and then look for the rest of the survivors. The trio then follow the plan, while nearby, Daniel continues to search for his wife. Suddenly, he sees the water churning next to him and discovers that it's Bella's pups, advancing towards him. Luckily, he manages to grab hold of an iron bar and leans on the ceiling, with the pups leaping out of the water to devour him at all costs. After a few seconds, the little sharks seem to have given up, and Daniel jumps into the water, continuing his search for Leslie. In fact, the pups have headed for the dormitories, where Elder and Josh are trying to hide. Hearing the sound of approaching sharks, Elder quickly climbs into one of the beds, while Josh runs to the bathroom and locks himself in the glass cabin. To his misfortune, another opening is made in the hull, leaving the place even more flooded, and in a few seconds, the cabin is full of water. Because of this, the shark pups manage to get inside and start devouring Josh, and even though he wants to help his friend, Elder can't do anything. Back at Misty's, she goes in search of the filter room, when she hears Daniel's screams and goes after him. Carlos seizes the opportunity, and as he enters the room with Trent, he breaks the handle, locking the door from the inside. Seeing this, Trent is furious, but Carlos doesn't intend to let the doctor live, or she'll denounce the whole experiment to the authorities. In response, Trent punches the insane man in the face and tries to open the door for Misty to pass through, but it's no use. He then speaks to the doctor through the window and asks her to wait, as he will come and get her after he has spoken to the Coast Guard. The two separate and Misty sets off in search of the other survivors. One of them, Daniel, finally finds Leslie, but she's in another corridor and can't hear him. He tries to call out for his wife, and when she finally finds him, the water around them begins to churn. Daniel knows what this means and desperately calls for Leslie to get out of there as soon as possible. The young woman rushes to him, but the door to the corridor is jammed and Leslie is pulled in by the pups and devoured by them. Outside the base, Trent reaches the terrace and manages to contact the Coast Guard, requesting an immediate rescue. They need to hurry, because the place is getting more and more flooded and Bella's pups continue to search for their prey. They eventually come across Elder, who is trying to cross the corridor using a mattress as a buoy. However, just as before, the water in front of him begins to stir and he ends up falling off the mattress. Luckily, Elder manages to swim fast enough to escape the pups and reaches another corridor, where he meets Daniel, distraught over the loss of his wife. He doesn't care about escaping anymore, but Elder says he needs his help because he won't be able to escape alone. After much insistence, Daniel agrees to leave and the two of them head off together in search of the exit. In the meantime, Misty is also looking for the survivors, when she finds a room with various pieces of equipment. In their midst, she picks up a blowtorch and uses it to remove the lock on the door to the filter room. Shortly afterwards, Elder and Daniel find her and are relieved to see that someone has survived. Unfortunately, Leslie and Josh aren't as lucky, but they have to keep going and take the exit to the terrace. Misty then tells Daniel and Elder to go ahead, when she hears the same sound of shark pups approaching. The doctor tells them both to close the door and she stays behind to eliminate the creatures, swinging the blowtorch into the water. As expected, the woman realizes that this wasn't a good idea and some of the pups manage to get past her and into the room. At the same time, Elder and Daniel climb the ladder to the exit, but the room begins to flood again and soon the pups will catch up with them. Outside the base, Trent is waiting for the Coast Guard, but before he goes after the survivors, he demands the key that Carlos is guarding. The guy refuses, because he doesn't want to get rid of his life's work, but Trent says it's too late and forces him to hand it over. As soon as he gets the key, he sets off to save Misty, when he hears Elder's voice inside the air duct. Trent promptly removes the railing and pulls his friend back to safety. But when it's Daniel's turn, they discover that the shark pups have reached him first and devoured half his body. With the creatures trying to get to the exit of the duct, the two are forced to drop Daniel's body and close the air duct. After yet another loss, there is little hope that Misty is alive, but the doctor manages to escape from the base through the tank and swims to the exit. As soon as she gets close to the terrace, she advances towards the group, when a huge fin appears behind her. The doctor tries to swim faster, and luckily she manages to get out of the water in time, with the help of Elder and Trent. She sees that Daniel isn't there, and knowing what this means, Misty accuses Carlos of having caused all this because of his ambition. Their argument is interrupted when a drone sent by the Coast Guard begins to fly over the site. It has been sent to confirm the distress call, and Elder and Misty shout for help. However, before the drone can transmit the call, one of the sharks leaps through the water and devours the object. The situation goes from bad to worse as the base becomes more and more flooded, and before long, it will sink into the sea. There seems to be no hope of escaping the situation, but Trent spots one of the emergency boats in the distance. They need to reach it before the whole base is submerged, but Elder refuses because he doesn't want to go into the water again. However, Misty doesn't give the man a choice and throws him into the sea, jumping in afterwards, alongside Trent and Carlos. The four of them swim as fast as they can to the speedboat, but Elder ends up being pulled to the bottom of the sea. Shortly afterwards, Bella's fin appears and she advances towards the group, but to everyone's surprise, she leaves Trent and Misty aside and sets off in search of Carlos. However, the guy enters the water and lets out a loud scream, causing Bella to turn away from her target. Apparently, the compound gave Carlos shark-like abilities and he was able to emit a sound wave, scaring away the huge predator. However, he soon realizes he was mistaken when Bella appears from below and lifts the guy up in one leap, devouring him in midair. After this attack, Trent and Misty rush to the boat and try to start it, but the engine isn't working. Shortly afterwards, Bella advances towards them, preparing to devour them with a single blow. This seems to be the end, but at the last second, Trent and Misty take flare guns from inside the boat and fire at the shark, which falls into the water apparently lifeless. Now that they are free of the predator, Trent starts the motorboat and Misty tries to look for Elder. Seconds later, the guy turns up alive and says he was captured by one of the sharks, but it just grabbed his sneakers and let him go. Finally, the three of them are able to escape, but Misty warns them that they can't leave the rest of the sharks alive. Trent agrees, and then he shows her the key he had taken from Carlos, along with a detonation mechanism, stored inside the speedboat. This detonator had been created by Carlos as a safety measure in case his experiment was revealed. So, when he presses the button, Trent blows up the entire base and the three of them leave, believing that all the sharks have been eliminated. 3 weeks later, on a beach, a young couple goes to catch some waves on their surfboard. However, they find out the hard way that Bella and her pups survived the explosion and are now loose in the sea, ready to devour everything they find along the way. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.